Thank you, Alan. Very hard act to follow there, but I'm going to try to keep everybody awake and talk to you all about Matrix. So in terms of pitching Matrix to the right audience, it would be useful to know who has any idea of what Matrix is already. Hands up if you know what it is. Right, interesting. About half the people have already heard me, presumably, or somebody enthused about Matrix. Yeah, it's all about the movie. It's like Keanu Reeves and PVC. It's amazing. What was that Trinity? I forget. Anyway, Matrix. I'm going to talk about it at a high level quickly and then give a bit of an update on where we're at because it's almost 2 years since we began the whole Matrix project and things are going kind of interestingly. But just as a quick recap of what it is. Basically, we're a non-profit, open source project which is delivering an open standard for defragmenting communication. And everybody should be painfully aware of the fact that the good old days of the PSTN being the one fabric for interoperable communication has kind of gone a little bit awry, and instead we've got all of these very fragmented silos, all of these OTTs which don't talk to one another. We've got 25 identical messaging apps on our phone. We're forced into using those apps by the people we talk to, rather than actually picking the ones which we might ourselves want to use. We don't know whether to trust these companies, we don't know what they're being obligated to do, and it's basically a bit of a futuristic dystopia that we've ended up in. So Matrix is our attempt to fix this. So our mission is to create a global, encrypted, end-to-end encrypted communication meta-network. Apparently the word internetwork has already been used. So a meta-network which connects together all of these existing silos, and that could be WhatsApp or Slack or Skype or any of these things, and basically returns control of our communication to be controlled by us, the end users. So it's up to us what app, what service provider we want to use in order to communicate. So honestly, it's a bit of a moonshot. It's a thoroughly overambitious project that we've spent a lot of time in, but the good news is that it's actually going kind of well. So in terms of the kind of silos we're linking together, you have things like Skype. We kind of consider the PSTN itself a silo these days. Hangouts could be an application ecosystem, something like GitHub that's a centralized service, and really whatever you might happen to have in the bottom right there, or the bottom. And Matrix goes and sits in the middle like this. So it is literally a decentralized network which has no single entity running or controlling it, where people can run their own servers, which are the dark blue things here, which go and then bridge by these light blue things here into the other networks. You can have users, who are the green dots here, who can talk on Matrix natively, or you can have users who are the green dots here, who can use whatever service it might happen to be to talk together. Make sense? Any questions? Please heckle, or if I'm talking too quickly or in the wrong language or whatever, please just go and yell at me. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So the whole point here is that no single party should own your conversations. So if I'm talking to Karel and he's on Vox's Liban hybrid or whatever it might happen to be, and I'm also talking to Alan, who's going to be using Slack just for a change, the idea is that conversation is not stuck in a single silo. It's not trapped in Slack, it's not trapped in perhaps Liban, it's not trapped in Matrix itself necessarily. Instead, we're literally replicating that conversation over the various different silos so that if I want to change service provider, I can do that. And if Liban was to pivot into becoming Liban cool and stop doing messaging, heaven forbid, then I don't get locked out of my conversations because I could have those conversations stored in Slack or anywhere else in Matrix. So this is basically the idea. So what can you do with Matrix? Well, obviously group chat is a huge thing here. Everything is group conversations. One-to-one is just a subset of group communication. Perhaps a bit more interesting is WebRTC signaling, in that WebRTC doesn't define a signaling layer, as I'm sure many people know. And so you have a choice of using SIP, or you can make up your own HTTP API, or use WebSockets or whatever. And we're just providing Matrix as a simple HTTP signaling API for WebRTC. You can obviously bridge things together, as I've said to death. Finally, Internet of Things data is a really interesting use case because IoT needs this interoperable data fabric. It needs an end-to-end encrypted data fabric so that people can go and publish data from whatever device it is and then consume it in whatever service, or aggregate data from different devices in a vendor-neutral manner. So in the end, it's basically just pub sub for any developers in the audience, and you're pub subbing persistent data to the whole world. Architecture, I've kind of already touched on, in that you have a whole bunch of servers which can be run by anybody. We obviously run one for matrix.org, but you have companies like Ericsson going and running their own. You've got, I think, Metaswitch, we're running one at least at some point. You've got telcos running them in labs. You have individuals running them on servers under their beds or in the basement or wherever. And these actually store the conversation in Matrix. You have then clients, which are apps, could be web apps, iOS, Android apps, desktop apps going and connecting into those servers. Then you have application servers, which are the fun bits which go and provide the value-added functionality. So the bridges, the integrations, you can almost think of a bot as an application server. And then identity, which we're going to skim over because a fun thing about identity in Matrix is that there is no true identity system. We are very pragmatic. We just go and hijack whatever you already have. So if your address book is full of phone numbers, then we go and identify people based on phone numbers. If it's email addresses, we use that. And that's basically the architecture that you can have any identity provider there. At the moment, it's just email addresses, but we're just adding phone numbers. And at the moment, it's logically centralized, but we're in the process of decentralizing it to be like the rest of Matrix. The ecosystem, as it stands right now, is kind of split into three main verticals. The web platform here on the left, and then iOS in the middle, and then Android on the right. And the blue stuff is what we ship as part of matrix.org. This is all open source. It's all Apache licensed, permissively licensed, so that anybody in the industry can pick it up and start building on top of it. At the bottom, we provide the actual server implementations, of which Synapse is the main one that everybody uses. We provide a whole bunch of bridges, which I'll talk about in a bit. The main sort of platform for the whole thing is actually the spec, which is an API doc that defines how Matrix plugs together. It's the equivalent to the SIP RFCs or the XMPP standards and ZAPs. And then on top of that, as I said, you've got a stack at 3 levels deep. The bottom one just wraps the HTTP APIs. Then you've got frameworks for going and building reusable components. And then you have actual apps. And we provide a very, very minimal wrapper called console, which takes the SDKs and just puts it into an app. It's unusable, it's good for developers, but as an example app here, Riot, which is the flagship Matrix client that really goes and shows all the things you can do with Matrix, which I'll demonstrate in a second. Meanwhile, on the big orange side here, you have other clients, because it's an ecosystem. It's a community with literally hundreds, possibly thousands of developers now building things on top of the APIs, and we're seeing loads of different clients and different platforms being written by the community. And meanwhile, you also have server-side, new home servers, new application servers, and bridges being written by folks. So what do you actually get? What does this do for you? Well, the kind of primitives you get are a decentralized conversation history, obviously. So basically your chat room history, and that's split into both a timeline and arbitrary key value stores. You have group messaging. The big new thing as of Monday, this Monday coming, is going to be cross-platform end-to-end encryption. So we've had this since September on the web, but we've just finished deploying it on iOS and Android, and it's just being submitted to the app stores. So this is going to be huge in that it's providing Apache licensed interoperable end-to-end encryption to everybody in this space. VoIP signaling, obviously, for WebRTC. You get push notifications, search, read receipts, typing notifications, all the good stuff you kind of expect. You get a very, very crappy decentralized content repository, and you can store account data for users. So talked a bit about clients. There are at least 30 that we know about right now, and they range all over the place, from text user interfaces like the IRC style interface that Adam was showing in the last talk, going through to desktop apps, going through to glossy ones, and even protocol proxies. And for those who do like IRC in the retro world, somebody's gone and written this Matrix IRCD project that exposes all of Matrix as an IRC network, which if you like IRC like me, is really cool. And then you've got client-side SDKs. We've got the official ones I already mentioned, but then there is a huge long tail of other languages where people have contributed their own SDKs. On the server side, we provide Synapse, which is a Python home server, which is entirely open source and is the thing that everybody runs. Meanwhile, there's Rumor, which is a community-led Rust implementation, kind of early, but still very promising, and a whole bunch of other ones in Go and Java written by other people in the community. So what does it look like? Enough talking, let's actually go and do some demos, which will inevitably fail, and see where things are at. So here is a Matrix client. This is Riot running on the web. And this is a non-staged example of an animated GIF of a glaring cat, as the developers back in London are going and messing around with the platform here. In Riot, I'm in about 600 different rooms here, which gives you an idea of the scalability. I challenge anybody to join 600 Slack channels and see how it handles it. And how many people? In this room, we've only got 74 people, which is the core team, and a bunch of hangers-on with various different people coming in via IRC. If we look at somewhere like Matrix HQ, we've got 5,013 people in there right now, which is a reasonable size for a room. This is bridged through into many, many different places, into Telegram, into IRC, into Slack. In fact, let's show what the bridging looks like. So hey everyone, just demoing. Always dangerous to tell 5,000 people that you're demoing, and even more dangerous to rely on the hotel Wi-Fi, but there we go, message has been sent. You can see actually here, these little bubbles are read receipts. Ooh, that looks like James Bodie. Thank you, James, for reading my message. Trust me, there are other people here who aren't in the audience. And you can see that these little read receipts are bubbling down. Another thing I might add that Slack doesn't have in terms of showing who has actually read these messages, and you can see this kind of Tetris effect as they go down as people read. If we go over those, say, to Slack, say that you really like Slack, like Alan, and want to see what's going on, then that's Gitter. Let's go to Slack here. Then we'll have the same view going on. Stupid thing scrolled me up. Let's scroll down, and you can see me saying, Matthew, there I am. Oh, hello. Oh, that's very meta. So then that's me on Matrix saying, hi, everyone, just demoing, and Dave in the London office wave back, and then James has gone and posted a message into Matrix, which is being propagated through into Slack. So, I mean, the conversation exists in both places. Meanwhile, on, say, the Gitter bridge, I'm not sure I'm actually in the main Matrix HQ room, but you have another similar room here, which is showing conversation coming in on the Matrix side. Let me do a dangerous demo briefly and fire up Telegram, because there's been a new bridge a few days ago that was written by the community, and here is Matrix HQ sitting here in Telegram, and I'm really hoping that if I scroll down, this thing might actually be working. Oh, there we go. So here it is again, happening in Telegram, with James going and taking embarrassing photos of me, demonstrating apparently the Gitter user interface. Perfect, that's how I want to be remembered. But you basically get the idea that it's the same conversation mixed all over the place. So what else can we do with this? Yeah, people are already complaining that we're showing, well, they think it's Slack, little do they know. Let's go to somewhere else. If I go back into the internal room here, meanwhile, whilst I've been chatting, you can see that other people have been talking away, using a GitHub integration here to argue about start typing notification bugs. As a real risk, let's see what happens if I start a video conference in here. Whoops. Video conferencing is still beta, so we get a big warning that comes up. And, oh, hello. Let's see whether I can dial through into the conferencing server. Oh, hello. So this is going into a free-switch conferencing server. Again, the hotel Wi-Fi is not amazing, so it's bouncing back. Let's see if somebody can join. Please enjoy the guitar music in the interim. And wait for the team to wake up. So this is using Matrix for WebRTC signaling, obviously, and it's going and talking through to the conferencing server. Oh, there we go. Who have we got? Oh, it sounds as if somebody joined his voice. That would be a fail. Oh no, we've also got somebody coming in his video, hopefully. Oh, there's Amandine. Hello, Amandine. Sorry, you're on a huge screen here in Lisbon, and thanks for joining the video conference, and who knows who else is joining there. And that's a Nerf gun in the UK office, which gives you an idea of the mentality of the UK. Okay, I'm going to hang up on this before the video. Oh, hello, Dave's chest. I assume that's Dave, yes. Hello, Dave. So that's a beautiful view of our office in Chiswick, the tech capital of Europe. Let me hang up before the quality completely collapses. There we go. And you can see that everybody else in that room is going to be saying, ongoing conference call, please join us, voice or video, or whatever. What else can I show you? Let me very quickly show you a totally different client. So this is, which one should I show you? This one's called NAChat, and it's very new, like about a month old, written by a one-man band who went and implemented an entire desktop Qt-based C++ client from scratch. And I'll fire it up here, and the user interface is not particularly polished, but you saw how quickly that loaded up on an account with all these different rooms, and if I jump into one of them, like Matrix HQ with its 5,000 users, and I've double-clicked on that, then I apologize that this is probably completely illegible on the screen, but suffice it to say that we've got a very fast timeline here. We've got thousands and thousands of users, a bunch of test users at the top, but then real users around here, and people going and chatting away in the room. So there's a little taster of where Matrix functionally is now. Let me get rid of Telegram and go back to the presentation. So, I should show you the end-to-end encryption, actually, because that's really cool. If I go into a room like Megolm, so Megolm is the name of the ratchet that we've built for doing group end-to-end encryption conversations, and it looks suspiciously like a normal room, except I've got a green padlock here that shows that anything I say is actually encrypted. There are people, of course, chatting away in this test room, and they've got these yellow warning things. And one of the really cool things we've done here is to really expose trust. So this guy is called Trilobite17 and has got a penguin for an avatar. Should I trust him? Well, if I go and click on that exclamation mark, at the moment, the UI of this is horrible, but it's telling us precisely the key that he's using on that device, and it gives me the option of comparing the fingerprint of his key and verifying it or not. So I can hit the verify button, say, hey, phone up this guy, confirm that that is actually who he says he is, and if it is, then we hit verify. This will get better, but the important thing is if I do hit verify, then magically his yellow triangle has become a proper padlock, and it knows for sure that I'm talking to that device. So if anybody went and man-in-the-middle attacks him, or if he switched device and I'm not sure whether to trust it, I will get warned. So this is a very, very powerful trust mechanism that you don't typically get in terms of being able to track on a per-device level whether you're talking to the person that you think that you're talking to. And if we look at one of these messages, you can see some beautiful ciphertext in here of some base64 that's actually encoding the message of what's going on, whereas if we compare that with an unencrypted one, so go back to HQ or something, and I know, oh, thanks, Mershu. Let's go and see Mershu saying, great demo, Matthew, and view source, and here's the unencrypted thing. It's just a chunk of JSON saying, great demo, and it's text, and it's got a message, and all the rest of it. How am I doing on time, Alan? Couple of minutes, brilliant. I'm about a third of the way through. Perhaps it's time to speed up a bit. If you want to send a message for developers, you do an HTTP post. If you want to set up a WebRTC call, again, it's a single post to invite, a single post to answer, and you're in the call. Give me that over SIP any day. That's a simple sequence diagram showing the invites, candidates. We do trickle ice for the people who know what trickle ice is, for VoIP signaling. Bridges look like this. Obviously, you've got the bridge in the middle, you've got Matrix on the right, and you've got some existing thing on the left. The list that we have right now, the ones that we provide as Matrix, are IRC, Slack, Gitter, Rocket Chat, Mattermost, FreeSwitch, Asterisk, and libpurple. Libpurple is alpha, but it's incredibly cool because it takes anything that Pigeon can talk and exposes it into Matrix. So you can use the libpurple thing, in theory, to talk to Skype or Facebook or WhatsApp or any of these things. Meanwhile, the community has been building Twitter ones. We just looked at the Telegram one. Somebody did a Hangouts one as part of TAD Hack, which was a very impressive demo. And people have done Slack webhooks, Gitter is a different architecture. Everybody in their cat has written an IRC one, and everybody in their dog has written an XMPP one because, from a geeky perspective, those are the ones which people get most excited about. The stack looks like that, but you don't care about that unless you're writing one. Community update, this is probably the interesting bit, more for the audience here. So we started this in September 2 years ago. We're in very late beta now, and in fact, chunks of it are formally out of beta. Right now, we've got almost 500,000 user accounts on matrix.org, and that's just one of the many servers in the overall federation. However, many of those users are bridged, and in practice, the unbridged ones is about 160,000 users. The server itself pushes about 500,000 messages a day. We see 50,000 rooms that that particular server is participating in. But the overall ecosystem, we can see at least 1,000 federated servers. Now, it's very hard to tell how big the total ecosystem is because people run private deployments, or they just don't talk to the Matrix one, or they don't phone home. And meanwhile, we've got about 50 companies who are building either experimentally or actually in production on top of Matrix. And the graphs look like this. So this is trying to be uncharacteristically honest in terms of showing the unbridged users on the matrix.org server. So these are the total registrations of real people using the service. And you can see in the first year, it was fairly minimal, a couple of thousand people. Then at FOSDEM in Belgium in February of this year, we saw a huge uptick, going into a completely different regime. Then we launched Vector, which turned into Riot there in June, and then here we relaunched Vector as Riot with end-to-end encryption. So you can see that the kind of size of the community is really quite ramping up. Activity is kind of fun. This is the number of messages, again, native messages rather than bridged ones, going through the matrix.org server, which is around 70,000 unbridged messages a day currently. And again, you can see that we've actually, if you compare this with like IRC or XMPP or one of the sort of other open standards, we've actually got some real momentum happening now. I could now give you a lecture on end-to-end encryption, but I think I'm out of time, which is a real shame because it's based on Olm, which are these little troglodytic salamanders. And there's basically the key things here is that it took us 2 years to get to where we are on the crypto. We based it on what Signal uses. It is not using the Signal intellectual property, though. It's an independent implementation that we wrote ourselves, and it actually goes somewhat beyond what Signal does because it needs to match the Matrix use cases. We got it audited by NCC Group Cryptographic Services, and I highly recommend if you ever want a really, really thorough, hardcore security audit. We're going to be announcing the results of the audit and actually releasing end-to-end across platform next Monday. And as I mentioned, we do per-target device encryption. This is actually really cool, something I didn't mention, that you can block encryption per device. So imagine the hypothetical scenario where you have your iPad sitting on the sofa at home with the kids, and your partner has their iPhone, and you want to start sending some messages to them. You have the option here of making damn sure those can only be decrypted on the iPhone rather than embarrassingly popping up on the iPad sitting on the sofa, hypothetically. So that's the kind of features we have there. We also have flexible history privacy per room. If you've got a tinfoil hat on and you never want anybody to be able to see the history of a conversation on a new device, then you can do that. If you're a little bit more pragmatic and you want to be able to share your history across new devices, so I buy a new iPhone and I still want to get access to all my old conversations, and then we support that too. Lots and lots of encryption stuff, which I will skip. Aren't you lucky? And then finally, what's coming up next? Well, we need to do a lot more bridges, bots, and services. There's threading is going to be a huge thing on the horizon. Message tagging, so likes, reactions, emoji. ACLs for groups, so I can invite an entire group into a room. Tagging and management of files, decentralized identity, and finally, last but not least, we still need to fix spam, because as Matrix grows, if we haven't fixed the abuse and spam problem, there's a risk that it becomes the single biggest honeypot for spam and abuse since SMTP email, and that would be a bad thing. And we need help, obviously. Please run your own servers. If you're building an app, consider using the Matrix APIs rather than reinventing the wheel for a 6,000th time. We need people to run right bridges. Please tell us where it sucks. Follow us on Twitter. Please really follow us on Twitter. And that's it. Thank you very much indeed.
Excellent. An excellent presentation, fast-paced as always. You drink too much coffee.
Yep, too much coffee.
Just wait. So we'll take one question. Roshni, if you could come down. Oh, Dinesh is here as well. Excellent. Okay. Roshni, come on down. And if you can get yourself set up. So we have a question at the back. There should be a mic on the, there you go.
Oh.
Testing.
Reading you loud and clear.
Excellent presentation. Thanks, Matthew.
Thanks.
2 questions, actually. 1, what pushes you to go open source your codes? 2nd, how does it help you commercially?
So the reason to go open source is that we really are trying to build the next generation of the web here, as near as damn it. It's meant to be a completely open ecosystem available to everybody, which people can build on both from a proprietary and an open source, and basically have no limits at all. Just like Tim Berners-Lee did when opening up HTTP and the web back at CERN in the 90s. So let's face it, the web would never have happened if it was a commercial walled garden from AT&T or Sprint or CompuServe or someone, and instead the entire success was that openness. So there was really no alternative at all for us to do that. But that doesn't mean to say you can't make good money, because if you look at the web, which is of course at its heart completely open and all of the sort of core technology is open source, I hear it's possible to run a fairly profitable business. Google seem to be doing okay these days on top of the web, and I expect to see precisely the same pattern happen on top of Matrix, where telcos can go and take the opportunity of running their own Matrix servers and provide the guarantees of carrier-grade SLAs and availability, integration with all the fun carrier services that you already have, links through to the PSTN, guaranteed storage, bots, machine translation, all of that good stuff can all be paid for and monetized. So it's really mimicking the model of the web entirely.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Sorry.